Hello everyone, this is going to be a really big video, at least for my standards. We're going to be going through the entire history of black and white overused. Before we get into that, what I'm bringing you guys in the background is going to be battles. I picked a select few battles dating back to SPL 5, so just probably 3 to 4 videos, or replays from each SPL. Some that might be a bit more exemplary of the tier in the metagame at the time than others, or some that are just particularly memorable, enjoyable battles for me, particularly. So without further ado, let's get into it. This first battle is just a game between Sogeking, Hellraiser, and Peachy, but we're not going to be commentating over the battles. Just a little introduction. We are actually going to be discussing the metagame. And in my hand, I have a note on my phone which brings a ton of commentary, and I'm going to hopefully leave the contents of the note in the movie description. But in the meantime, over this video, over the next could be hour, hour and a half, I'm going to give commentary on how the black and white metagame has evolved, all the way dating back to Black and White 1, which came out in late 2010, to where we are now in 2020, 3 generations later, with a whole lot of history, controversy, shifts, and whatnot under its belt. And since 2011, late 2011, when I started playing, I've been able to observe pretty much all of this. And I have talked to some people recently about where the metagame was before I started and over that first year, but also a lot of it is documented on Smogon, where able to find it there. So let's get into it. In Black and White 1, the metagame started, and it was definitely really hectic. People were surprised that Team Preview was a thing. It was not a thing previously. Generation 4, the generation prior, had no Team Preview, for example. It was kind of blind Pokemon in a way, but there was also a lot of skill and knowledge was rewarded to a certain degree there. So it was a big shift in the competitive Pokemon community, that was for sure. And in the early days, the generation was really defined by weather. Why, you may ask? Well, most importantly, while Tyranitar got Sandstorm dating back to Generation 3, Politoed now got Drizzle, and Ninetales got Drought. And those are 2 Pokemon that became very viable in the OU metagame, and still are, especially Politoed, who's been within the realm of top tier Pokemon ever since the release of Black and White due to this. In fact, rain teams with Politoed as the rain setter have been good enough to where they've kind of warranted restrictions and bans over the years on numerous occasions. So that's definitely something to keep in mind. Let's get into how that shaped the metagame and why that was the case now that we are at this point. So during the early days, the weather was defining the generation to the point that people were really scared of what rain teams could do, especially unrestricted rain teams. So back then, you saw a lot of rain teams with things like Kingdra and Ludicolo, Kabutops, Swift Swimmers, if you will, and also things like Thundurus and Incarnate. And couple that with the fact that Rangers tend to cool, and even things like Starmie, which actually didn't pick up till Analytic got big later on. Um, but yeah, there were just so many new toys to abuse on these rain teams that they were instantly a player base favorite, and not for any surprising reasons either. They were just really good. They were potent offensively, and also there were so many options defensively. But more defensively oriented rain teams we'll get into a bit later. As at the start of things, the fact of the matter is that people were spamming the shit out of these like Swift Swim abusing teams. Um, and because of that, ultimately, the community came to a bit of a crossroads at first. While there were early bans like Excadrill, Blaziken, Thunderous Eye, in early tests, they actually had whole slates for the voting where they voted on like 5 or 6 Pokemon at a time during a state. Things like Dragonite with Multiscale, Volcarona, Latios, all were voted on as well as all the weathers. People, there were votes on Sandstream, Drizzle, Drought, even Snow Warning. But ultimately, none of the weathers outright got banned, and nothing like Dragonite or Volcarona or Latios got banned either. However, Excadrill, Blaziken, and Thunderous Eye are some of the most noteworthy bans. And all of them happened really before I was too great, but Blaziken got Speed Boost, and that coupled with a nice move pool, giving good dual stab and hidden power options like Swords Dance, allowed for so much. I'm going to be getting to the next game now. Allowed for so much that really there was unlimited possibilities offensively, and it was very hard to keep in check. Moreover, Thunderous, on the other hand, was a bit more of an outright attacker itself with Prankster. It was able to use Nasty Plot and Thunder Wave, while coupling that with Thunder, Hidden Power, or Thunderbolt, depending if it's Rain Team or not. Actually, a lot of Red Thunderbolt was probably more common than Thunder, honestly, from what I've heard. And also Focus Blast is just really potent. Um, and there was a lot of options, and it was just really good to the point where it was voted to be banned. It's just kind of a better version of the Thunderous T we know now due to Prankster in a lot of ways. In fact, the Thunderous T now is a bit more finesse, but I digress. I'll get into that as we get to that point in the video. And Excadrill was banned because with Sand Rush it was just outright ridiculous. And then there was the whole problem of rain. And people saw the abuse of Swift Swimmers on rain teams, and they were like, "Oh shit, we got to do something to really tackle that." Sorry, I'm just editing something to note that was typoed. But yeah, so then there was this huge controversial vote that came really close. That was basically, do we ban Drizzle? Do we ban Swift Swim plus Drizzle? Do we do nothing? Kind of the options. I'm not really sure the exact premise of the final vote. I know the system was really complicated and weighted, and to this day, there are a lot of people that believe that that vote should have been differently, or black white as it is should be completely different. And that's nothing wrong with that. A lot of people believe that a clear skies black white would be optimal, or a drizzleless black white would be optimal, or one with a completely different approach to that complex bend would be optimal. And I can't give you a revisionist history of what would be the case had that happened. I can't tell you what would be best, but I can tell you what did happen was ultimately unprecedented complex ban of Swift Swim plus Drizzle was made the final result. So therefore, things like Kingdra, Ludicolo, Kabutops could no longer use Swift Swim on rain teams, and because of that, their usage and viability faded significantly to the point where none of them are really relevant in Black White. We see fringe usage of Kingdra and Weatherless here and there nowadays, but none of those teams are really good. They're all fishy. I'm not a fan of them in particular. But yeah, I digress. That happened, and suddenly we began to eventually shift to some weird semblance of a balance in the middle of Black and White 1. And by the end of Black and White 1, a lot of people believed that was a really ideal metagame. But how did we get there? Well, first and foremost, Ladder was actually really good back then. On Pokemon Online, the program that was a predecessor to Pokemon Showdown, ran by Zarel himself, the replay system, in fact, and also a guy called Chaos, who's kind of the owner of the Pokemon Online community and one of the people that created it alongside this guy called Coyote, who I believe was the formal creator. Um, they were the people who ran Pokemon Online, and those were where all of the early Black White 1 games occurred. Um, in fact, well through Black White 2, that was still the case. But anyway, regardless of that, this metagame in mid Black and White 1, once those like initial wave of bans happened, was pretty solid. There were still things that were kind of stupid in the metagame, such as Deoxys Defense, which eventually found its way out of the tier as well, which of course could set up hazards and do all sorts of shenanigans on more offensive weatherless teams, even sometimes with like a Choice Band Tyranitar slept on, just like a sand really offensive team. And there was nothing wrong with that. They were actually pretty common at times on the ladder. At other times, they fell in usage. In fact, before it got banned, I think it was even close to, if not completely dropping to underuse. So it's just funny how that worked. But yeah, it was not really the most competitive option. And because of that, it got the boot as well. However, with that said, there were also so many redeeming qualities of this metagame, and I loved the mid late black and white one. That's kind of when I really got good for the first time. I was a player on Pokemon Online in their community more so than Smogon, and I played on ladder a ton. There were so many players that developed into household names at one point or another. In particular, I was there, of course. There were also guys like Moet who played in a couple of SPLs. There was Blunder that kind of had his start back then. Joey predates that. He started in DPP, I believe, but that's also when he kind of gained traction. Just first got into tournaments, which was really cool. Um, let's see, Gary the Gengar was someone I sparred with on the ladder quite a bit. We actually exchanged some interesting words here and there. Um, Beyond that, Valentine was someone that started back then. A whole controversy. BKC started during DPP on Wi-Fi, but he got good during Black White for real. He had a lot of. I played him so many times on the ladder back in the day. He used these nasty rain teams, and he was phenomenal. Um, you can go on and on and on. I mean, I'm pretty sure that guys like TDK and ABR at least played during Black White here and there. I know ABR like had PO for like a little bit and then like stopped playing after like he played casually and then really got good in XY. I'm not sure if TDK started in XY or Black White though, but the point is that a lot of the names that we recognize now or recognize in the past, like for example, Great Astrid or Hugo, if you will, he got good in the Black White One ladder, and he was constantly at the top of the ladder, peaking the ladder by ridiculous margins, and that's how he became the assistant manager of the Wolfpack. And then he had his OSTU at the same time, and then he won World Cup on East, and he had this like ridiculous stretch, and it was crazy. His presence and whatnot. Also, someone that went by the name of I believe Selby42 turns into Solwyn, who we're now watching a battle of in a game that consists of this kind of sweepage sand team that Toxin is using, which kind of was a timeless classic and was really good around the Smog Tours like 16 to 19 era. And Solomon using a Feraligatr Rain, which was trendy at this time, but we're talking years later than we're at right now. So let's get back to where we are now. But yeah, at this point in time, a lot of people were getting their starts, and a lot of like kind of old legends from the DBP era were arguably fading. Um, so yeah, it's pretty interesting to see how things age and looking back at it and all of this history that I've thankfully been able to witness firsthand, if not even be a part of firsthand in more recent years, which I could not be more thankful for. It's really cool. Um, Moving forward, though, things in the metagame that were cool, Landorus Eye was allowed because Share Force was not released until Black and White 2, which is when those forms got their secondary abilities. So therefore, Sand Force was the ability you could use, and it wasn't quite broken with Sand Force, one could argue. Hell, some argued that it was, honestly. Those people did have a fair point. Excuse me, just coughed a little bit. Basically, it used Sand Force sets. Initially, a lot of people were using Scarf with Earthquake, Stone Edge, Hidden Power Ice, and U-Turn, but people began to use Expert Belt, or even I used Yachi Berry. Expert Belt was really cool because people ran Smackdown with it to hit things like Skarmory and the switch and Rotom W in the switch, which made it immensely threatening, especially seeing the Sand Force made it so strong in the sand with that Earthquake. And Hidden Power Ice, of course, hit opposing, Lando T, and the Gliscor, which didn't have Roost with Poison Heal at the time, so it wasn't quite where it is now, but it was still pretty damn good nevertheless. A lot of the time it ran Sub-Toxic, which was really nasty, especially with some support on the right team. And those teams were just the worst to play against. But anyway, I digress. Moving beyond that, we also saw a whole slew of other things. Landers Eye, of course, was on sand teams a ton, but we also saw Rotom W running more offensive stuff like Specs and Scarf. We saw that a ton on teams such as like Rain teams, for example. Um, Rain teams like you were seeing Akaluz using a Volcarona Rain, which was actually sort of in and out of style back years ago. No longer really in style, unfortunately. But that was always cool. I spammed a Rain Volk team back myself. Was like my first big team that I peaked with back in like 2012, late 2012, early 2013, if you will. But yeah, there was a ton of going around there. Skarmory was also pretty damn common back then, especially relative to where it is now. Also, a guy called Eternal and a few others used Rainstall. Not only did it make its way into the ladder, but also into tournaments, and it was quite good at the time. It's always going to be a bit of a matchup fish, but really was phenomenal. A lot of the times you saw Politoed, Tentacruel, Ferrothorn, Chansey, Jirachi, Gliscor, Skarmory, just to name like a handful of Pokemon that you can find on those builds. I think I just named like 8 Pokemon. So like you normally six it up full of eight. Also, you occasionally saw Dragonite, or even a couple other things like Quags. I don't think Quags are. No, never mind that. I'll retract that part. But yeah, on top of this, it was also worth knowing Latios played very differently. A lot of people used Life Orb on it back then, even in Black and White too. Specs was still superb, don't get me wrong, but yeah, Latios was a bit more versatile than it was now, but it also was kept in check more and just overall more, and just not as much the focus of attention. It probably was busted back then like it is now, but it was different. It was a completely different dynamic. Ferrothorn on sand was not as common as it is now. That was really a Black and White 2 slash during the Gen 6 adaptation of the metagame, truth be told. And to add some more commentary on this point of the metagame, the last thing I'll be saying about Black and White 1 before we shift away from its beauty, Terrakion became really good. It was even seen as ban-worthy with the gem and choice band set near the end, but there was never a formal suspect on it. Kind of feels like Zard X in XY, as it was not like broken at the end, but then the next generation, part of the generation came and it was not less good. But the thing is, Tracken has so much more staying power than Zard X. Sorry, let's say Zard Y. I meant Zard X. Zard X did XY, if only because Tracken is just so good in Black White still. It might not see the usage always, but it is a superb option in the metagame, and nobody should doubt that. It's just been potent, and there's no big drawback like Zardex's Stealth Rock weakness or taking up the Mega Slot. It's great. Rock Gem Set was discovered around then with Thorgent, which was able to help take out things like Slowbro, which actually did gain some usage, and also Gliscor, which at the time was still fine in the metagame. The thing is that Black White 2 brought along Lando T. We'll get that in a second. But yeah, it's still worth taking like Hippowdon to get it in check, and rain teams that were able to suffocate it, and priority intermittently. Things like Scizor. Scizor is more common back then than it was now, that's for sure. So yeah, but now we're gonna shift to Black and White 2, and that shift is a humongous shift in the metagame. Um, Probably gonna start playing these on fast just because I want to get through all these replays. That might be too fast. We'll see how this goes for the rest of the game. Anyway, so I labeled this in my notes: Hectic Rain slash Offense Stage Black White 2 Start, and that pretty much sums up it in a bit. But let's unpack it because there's so much to go through. First and foremost, some noteworthy additions to the metagame that proved themselves to be suspect worthy were Tornadus T, which got banned, Genesect, which got banned, and Keldeo, which just was great. all around great. And also on top of those, Landorus T got added to the metagame, and Thunderous T got added to the metagame along this line as well during Black and White 2. And I mean, all of these Pokemon have played such a role in shaping the way we see Black and White 2 as it currently holds, and that really should be no surprise. They're all great Pokemon, but the fact of the matter is that they're being added to the dynamic is just such a huge shift, such a clusterfuck effect on the metagame, if you will. Really was, wow, I don't even know how to put it. Just shocking. I mean, think about it. All five or six top tier Pokemon added to a metagame that already was highly controversial over the years. It's obviously going to create unprecedented shakeups. I go to the next game here. Oh yeah, now we're in SPL 6. So this is the first SPL I was in. Jirachi was actually my teammate. And we got another Peachy game. I love Peachy and her team. She was such a creative player. But anyway, so Tornadus T was the first kind of like big suspect. It was voted, it was banned pretty like overwhelmingly. Regenerator, coupled with the fact that it was so fast and made rain teams even more OP than ever before, was just absolutely too much for the metagame. I can't even begin to express how ridiculous Tornadus T is. I was playing actively at that point. It was like my main hobby by then. And just on the ladder, it was ridiculous. I mean, even teams with like Jirachi plus Tyranitar plus Rotom W could eventually get worn out by Tornadus T. It was so good. It could run. A lot of times it ran like Life Orb. I've even saw leftovers and specs as well, and all sorts of items. I mean, it was versatile. I don't think there was one set that really defined it so much as it ran flying move, fighting move, U-turn, filler, oftentimes taunt to help check things like special defensive Jirachi and Skymory, and even the sporadic Chansey, which I guess did see usage back then. Keep in mind, Eviolite was the black and white one option, so it was also used during Black White One. Chansey was like unknown at that point. Whereas, of course, in prior generations, it was always Blissey. Besides RBY, when Blissey didn't exist, of course. Anyway, moving beyond that, um, oh, we're gonna get okay. So some other things that were allowed into the metagame before we get past the Tornado Seed ban. Technician Breloom finally came out. So during Black and White One, we saw a lot of Poison Breloom, Sub Punch, Sub Seed, even the occasional bulk up, and these were all fine, decent options, no doubt about that. But none of them had the same lasting effect as Technician, arguably. And for more on this, please watch the Breloom and history video. It was actually posted on Reddit. It has like 700 some odd views, which is really cool, or 600 some odd views. But yeah, that's really cool. I was really happy with that about that video, and overall, Breloom one of the most intriguing black white options over the years. That's for sure. But yeah, on top of Breloom getting Technician, also Alomomola and Amoonguss got Regenerator of note, which is pretty damn cool. Both those Pokemon turned out to have some place in the metagame. Alomomola has always been a fringe option, unfortunately, but despite it being fringe, it does have some viability. And Amoonguss, of course, became a mainstay with Spore and still is a very viable option. And Gliscor got Roost in conjunction with Poison Heal, which was really a big buff to it, I'd say. Oh, this is like this miscentered a bit. Is this one? No, this one's perfect. Okay, I don't know why this one is off center. But yeah, this is actually a classic game between Ojama and Marth where this Subdrachi went ham against a psychic team, which I really found cool and it was hilarious at the time. Because Marth was like, I don't give a fuck team. I want hacks as well. But anyway, this is still a couple years ahead of where we are in terms of discussion. This was February 26, 2015, so latest spell 6. But anyway, getting back to what I was saying, Roost on Poison Oak score is really cool. It can recover so much on any given turn. Um, and yeah, Rain teams just ran wild with all these new toys. Tornado Sea quickly proved to be broken. It was ridiculous, as I said. It was able to hit hard and never really died because Regenerator played far more offensively than Oras or even SM Z sets would play, and those can play very offensively as a pivot. But yeah, there was also a brief period of the trio being used on Rain alongside Tornado Sea to trap Tar and Jirachi, which was even more ridiculous. Thankfully, um, that was a sign of things to come later on, but that was much later on. So we were able to go a couple years without much Dug Trio infestation besides the sporadic Sun team, which never really gained traction in this metagame as there were so many other things to focus on. Genesect took a little bit longer to figure out to the point where it was actually kind of being normalized in the metagame, and that was fine. I didn't actually find it like overwhelmingly broken, but it clearly was something that was like a tier above where it needed to be balanced, like if that makes sense. Like it had all of these options at disposal and forced really specific counterplay. I used especially defensive Tran a ton during this time for it, for example. It actually became really common on sand structures. But yeah, Genesect was viable very much so as a Scarfer, and even ran like expert belt sets eventually. It was seen on rain and sand and weatherless, of course. People even began running Life Orb on it. Um, Really strong, and download is obviously a great ability. People even started EVing around download at some points or another, which was cool. So yeah, Gen 6 did take a while to file up, hoping for it to be broken again. Things like Tentacruel finally started to kind of shape in to form and gain popularity in Black White as well during this time. Tentacruel is obviously a kind of staple to your Pokemon nowadays. I don't think I need to really introduce it much further. Sorry, excuse me. Oh, I'm a little tired now. But yeah, no, there was no denying the fact that it was good. It saw plenty of usage at this time, and it kind of stayed that way through and through. Whereas before, it saw a lot more usage on like rain install during Black White One, or even some rain teams for they didn't include a spinner, which I always found weird back then. But spikes just weren't as much of a priority as they are now. Um, anyway, yeah, that was pretty cool. And eventually, Genesect did get banned, and Keldeo suspected a couple times, but never got banned, and that's still controversial to this day. I know guys like BKC still want it banned and believe it should have been banned back then, and I understand why. Keldeo is a force to be reckoned with. Personally, back when the Scarf set was coming on Rain, I thought it was broken for a couple years. I'm a bit less certain now. We see a lot more specs usage now, which is potent and even arguably more broken in a lot of senses, but it is kind of revenge killable slash abusable to some extent. Things like Jellicent, which we're seeing out here now, can arguably take advantage of it. But anyway, on top of that, Landorus T was able to neutralize Terrakin a little bit, but it never fully took off. During the early days of Landorus T, and I discussed this in my History of Landorus T video, people weren't really sure what to do with it. They ran the 264 speed rock set for Buzzing Bloom and whatnot, but it was never like the best Pokemon. It was just okay. Double Dance also so used. Scarf never really took off though, but it was enough to kind of neutralize Tracheon, which was cool. Thunderous T was also like not as potent as it is nowadays. It did see its times, but it wasn't really the same. That's for sure. As finally this Justin goes down in this game. But yeah, beyond that, for Alligator was something very much not banned, but Great Astrid, Hugo, whatever you want to call him. He used for Alligator on these rain teams, and it gained a ton of traction on the ladder. It was actually really solid. Um, there were like this whole wave of Polytoad, Tentacruel, Jirachi, Celebi for Alligator, like speed with like Landorus T or Latios or Keldeo type of teams. And those were solid for a long time. It was kind of like Feralist Rain. Sometimes they'd even ran Feral. In fact, I believe in the one of these games, yeah, in this game, Solwind ran for Alligator, which is cool. Am I the right one? No. Yeah, okay, we're back here. But yeah, anyway, at this point, we're approaching later Black and White 2, and I kind of call this the sand takeover phase. Once all of this hectic stuff settled down, while for Alligator Rain and other types of rain with Keldeo and whatnot were surging, we also saw a fair amount of Gyarados. It wasn't just for Alligator, it was more. I wanted to go out of my way to mention for Alligator because I find it cool that something of that like nature that you kind of view more as an RU type of Pokemon was just as good as it was for a long time, and it was like genuinely quite good. But yeah, as we approached the second half of Black and White 2, the metagame shifted after a hectic start to Black and White 2. Sand balance began to be standard, like for real standard again. Like that was something that was like risen to prominence, which was always cool. Things like bulky pivot road and W finally began to take shape as Pokemon it is currently. Um, all right, let's get to the next replay before I continue commenting on that. This is a game from SPL 6 Finals, a really infuriating period as the Ruiners and the Bigs were better than the Classies, but the Classies locked through those finals back then. Yes, I'm still salty. SPL 6 Bigs was the best team ever created. Let's move on from that before I get sidetracked anymore. Um, yeah, so Road and W finally started running this like pain split. Willow was kind of sad. Actually, my friend from the ladder way back when Ripamon used it in Black White 1, but it wasn't really as common back then. It was used here and there, but we saw Specs on Rain, Scarf on Rain, and even on Sand. Three attack sets with Hidden Power Fire, Signal Beam with Expert Belt as well for Celebi. We saw all sorts of things, and finally it began to take shape as more of a pivot. Of course, offensive sets still saw sporadic usage, but it was predominantly a pivot at this point in time, and the metagame was slowly starting to stabilize around Sand, with some flashy options like Technician Bloom still being accessible on both Rain and Sand teams. However, the initially introduced flashy Pokemon from Black and White 2, such as Tornadus T and Genesect, saw their way out, whereas Keldeo kind of surfaced as more of a Rain threat as opposed to a Sand option. which is pretty cool. How we kind of saw these archetypes develop over time right in front of us as we played the metagame and kind of carved them out as ourselves. In addition to this, some things like Extra Keldeo really took shape and became like more prominent to the extent that we knew them as big threats they were during XY during this time. I think that was another great Astro tech. I swear on my life that I actually used it without Hidden Power Bug for Solvi, but I actually used it with Hidden Power Ghost myself on the ladder before Hugo created it with Hidden Power Bug. But the Hidden Power Bug was what made it really good because Celebi was so good at the time, and I didn't even think of that as an option. I was just kind of casually laddering. I still wasn't much of a tournament player outside of Pokemon Online at the time. I didn't play Smog in tournaments until my big break in late 2014 when I was able to make Smog Tour playoffs and have a really close series against Megan. But we'll get there, that's for sure. But yeah, Keldeo is still fantastic. After Suspects not getting banned, never really faded away. But countermeasures to it, such as Jellicent, did see a little bit more users than before. Um, Guys like BKC and have always been BKC and I don't know who else. I just kind of associate Jellicent with BKC and now like ABR, but even then we don't see it a ton from them nowadays. But like during like the stretch of like 2013 to 2016, 17, they did use Jellicent balance a fair amount when ABR surfaced anyway. But BKC like through and through, I kind of picture him as like grimy Jellicent, Gliscor, Zam, Pharaoh, Tyranitar, Heatran, and kind of like his like vicinity of like sand teams. And there's always been like really tried and true solid sand teams. No doubt about that. We used to see Solomon using Jellicent here. We've actually seen quite a few Jellicent replays this far, which is cool. But yeah, that and more importantly, Amoonguss shot from being like an RU type Pokemon to finally getting Regenerator and being able to abuse Spore and being a fully fledged OU option. It actually finished the generation RU by usage, which I always found funny because it was better in OU than UU. UU Jellicent's just okay. Um, but Black and White RU and Mungus is definitely better than UU, but probably actually worse than OU. I think OU might be the best of the three tiers, but it just never picked up enough on the ladder. So, ironically enough, while it was an option to check Keldeo, Balloon, Rotom W, and a nice anti-metagame option with Regenerator, New Toy, and Spore, what might be the best or second best move in the game, um, it was never OU by usage, but it was definitely of note, I'd say. Oh my god, is that that's a Scarf Train, I was going to say. Anyway, spikes at this point in time also begin to increase, which kind of foreshadows a later tiering sequence, if you will. We'll get to that more, but spikes always were good in black white, as you can see here, of course. But at this point, they got even better, which I found to be pretty cool. In Tracheon, again, that was ended by the newly bolstered Gliscor with Roost and Poisonile, as well as sorry, Roost plus Poisonile, not Roost and. It got Poisonile during Black White 1. Do not let that mistake you. It very much was using Poisonile during Black 1. I still have nightmares about some of those games. But it also Landers T, so it wasn't really ever suspected or banned. There's also kind of a wave of hyper offensive teams that we saw a lot by guys like Smurf and Zozua and pretty much the entire continent of Europe. So that was also worth noting. I'm just going to grab a sip of water, but then we're going to get into the very end of Black White 2 slash XY era, which, in my opinion, is where it gets really interesting. And we're also getting close to like the SPL 5 time. We're probably about a year behind it now. And we're probably about two and change years. This, unfortunately, I'm only bringing you guys SPL replays. If I got replays from like World Cup and Black White Cup as well, it would really be able to like capture even more of like the essence of these metagames. But I can only fit so many replays while I'm narrating because I can only go for so long in this video. And I'm trying not to skimp out on details, but still, I mean, I think it'll be between an hour and a half by the so we'll wait and see. Okay. Let me just scroll down my note and see how much I do actually have left. Oh boy, this note still goes on for a while. We're a bit before the halfway mark, I'd say. Which is the problem because I have so many replays. I'm gonna start playing all these at fast. Yeah. In fact, this one draws out, so I'm playing hyper fast. So this is what I like to call the spike into psychic magic guard metagame, if you will. Black and White 2 ended and XI began. People started spamming the shit out of things like Scott Flanders T, which actually was a byproduct of XY usage, i.e., it was really good in XYOU at the start, and then it moved down to Black and White. The trend shifted downward, which is very much a thing. People notice things about old Pokemon in new generations and then try them out in old generations. It's a really cool thing, and it just shows how adaptable our player base is. And I have to change the music 1 second. Actually, Mount Cornet's fine. Um, but yeah, this was like my first like real understanding of this. 'Cause I wasn't around in like the Black White DPP era when like that shift happened. So what's happening here? Oh, I probably have to be prompted to continue watching. Yup, sorry about that. Just gonna continue here. Where are we? We're here. Yeah. Okay. This is the last of the SPL 6 replays for what it's worth. This is SPL Finals again. Just to give you a little commentary on that before we get into this like new metagame that I'm discussing. This is for Finals, and Puppy Noel was on. Well, it's Aladdin, by the way, was on the Fancy's team that I just mentioned I hated before, and Sullivan was on the Ruiners team, which were kind of like the good guys against the bad guys. And unfortunately, he's gonna fall short in this Weird Nicholas war ultimately. Just a little more water before we get in the second, like quote unquote, half of this video, I guess. You pretty much see that Weird Nicholas is gonna just win with that crit. Um, and yeah, it's gonna be that great game. How to be outplayed every turn like the shit of my opponent because I can't win otherwise. I love Solwyn's commentary on games. Anyway, this is actually a classic SPL 7 game. I really want you guys to pay close attention to this one. So actually, I'm gonna let you guys look at this game and see what happens, and then we'll get back into it. So Sun's gonna send out Volcarona using the quick quiver dance, and then the game ends. One, two, three, and then he forfeits. This is the shortest game of SPL 7, just sewing defeating Sweepage. But yeah, anyway, now let's get back. This is actually one of my games. But yeah, we're gonna get back into the metagame discussion here. Um, So yeah, as I said, Black White 2 ended, XY began, and in XY, people started using Scarflanders to a ton. It was a great kind of pivot and revenge killer in that really developmental metagame. And eventually it kind of like trickled down to Black White. Yeah, I guess that's how I'd put it. And Landorus 2 went from being a really good Pokemon, but like not like really defined by any set. We saw Double Dance, we saw Rocks, we saw Scarf here and there, to being like predominantly Scarf, majority Scarf. Like over 2/3 of them were Scarf, if not over 3/4 of them were Scarf. And that made a lot of sense because if you think about it, Black White was like a spikes infested metagame, and well, spikes spikes were a thing. Like they were very common, and Landorus 2 was immune to them, whereas things like Keldeo, Tyranitar, Garchomp, Terrakion, Jirachi, all those Scarfers were not actually immune to spikes. We're changing music again, I guess. Okay, YouTube. Um, in addition, though, that was not the only anti-spikes surge at the time. As I mentioned, this is what I call the Psychic Magic Guard metagame. And that's because Alakazam and Rhea took off. And as you see here, this is a perfect example. In SPL 6, albeit about a year later, than like at this like early developmental start, we saw this Alakazam surge. Um, and Nicholas was not far behind. During the SPL 6-7 metagame, these Pokemon probably were at their like then peak, and now they're kind of peaking again, if you will, but not to the same extent. And the spike immunity coupled with the fact that they've used the spike damage on things like Jirachi and Tyranitar just goes such a long, long, long way. I mean, look, I even nicknamed it Zam Spike Scent, and you're gonna watch it. I'm not even. I timed this perfectly. You're gonna basically watch it clean out Marth's team, and Marth is a really good player. He was one of the top players for a couple years in SPL. I mean, like, yeah, I'm gonna get the drop and I'm gonna hit the focus, but it just cleaned out this team, and it was really great. It also killed the Tar, killed the Tran, it could kill the Slowbro, etc. And yeah, he just forfeited there. This game actually only lasted 4 minutes in real time, which was funny. But anyway, let's get back to it. We're gonna be yeah, okay. So yeah, eventually Magic Guard being immune to spikes, being like a clear like reason to use these Pokemon, and they just grew so much in usage. It got to the point where people like Ojama in one of the original Black White Cups used a team. I don't remember if it was in Black White Cup like later stages or if it was in playoffs, but it had like Latios, Mew Nicholas, and Alakazam or something like that. It had like 4 Psychic types in this Weatherless team. It was just so nasty. Yeah, and it got to the point where Babidi Heist was calling for a spike spin. I recall posts about this. Various people wanted Nicholas to be suspected. Some people wanted Alakazam. And Rain was losing some popularity, but the Rain teams we saw, a lot of them shifted to having Jirachi over something like, say, Ferrothorn or both of them. Chapeltar eventually became even more mainstream than ever before at that point, and it kind of stayed that way even once that metagame ended because people just had fond memories of like getting their asses kicked by Psychic types if they didn't have Chapelberry. So while it was like a thing beforehand, it was even more of one afterwards, if that makes sense. This gave us even more like caution against those Psychic types with Focus Blast. So yeah, On top of that, spikes just kept getting more common. We saw Skarmory so much. This was like peak Skarm of black white usage time, I'd say. And on top of that, we also saw random things like Sableye and Metagross pop up. Sableye is completely gross, but whatever. It did the trick in checking Alakazam and Monster Nicholas, so that's that. But yeah, eventually this led to a very controversial period where actually we're finally kind of evening out time wise, but where Excadrill dropped into black and white overused with the combination of Sandstream and Sandforce being banned to line up with that Swiss swim ban. This was around a time when the Black and White Council was formed, starting old generation tiering, which was very controversial. It started the Legend Council, so it was me, BKC, I think Jirachi, EO. At the time, we might have had couple people. M Dragon, right? M Dragon was on board. Eventually, we gained McMegan and Dice, who are superb, but not at the start. Um, Ojama and McMegan, however, are very crucial players in this dynamic because they were kind of the people who led that movement to free Excadrill to kind of get us out of this like spike psychic spam metagame. Because Excadrill gives us a spinner and a sort of like pseudo psychic check. It also just fit on teams with like Stealth Rock Tower, which can function as them. So it would have shifted the usage trends of the metagame, if you will. Um, and they eventually became called the Mallmen because it was just unprecedented tampering with a past metagame, which we'd never seen before to the point that Black White was not only one of the most controversial tiers, tiering wise, during the unprecedented complex ban, but also in the aftermath of it, getting even more and more tiering, just made it seem kind of messy from an outside perspective. And there was a lot of backlash to changing a old generation metagame, but it stuck. All generation councils were formed. There was a vote. Excadrill was freed with the condition that it kind of obliged by the same Sand Rush plus Sandstream ban, and that happened. So um, one could say that it was partially in reaction to the like hectic metagame state, and partially in reaction to just a long-standing belief that this was a misaction in previous Black White, and Excadrill could be freed under those conditions, given the way they handled rain abusers in a similar fashion. And this caused Psychic Spam to kind of dip a little bit. It was seen as kind of good, but not superb anymore, if only because there was another spinner to kind of middle in the affairs of their setup approaches with spikes. So it was good. Magic Guard Pokemon have always been good, and they will continue to be good. Please don't take this as me dismissing them. They still are great. We'll see teams like the one Shoka is using with one, if not both of these, for years to come, I'm sure as well. But the metagame trend shifted a bit, as they would in reaction to pretty much any substantial tiering change, and this should be no shock. Because of this, Landorus T got even better. Things like Rotom W begin to pop up more to check Sand Force variants and Sand Rush on Sand, but Mold Breaker variants still work bad for Rotom W as well, so it's also in the note. Okay, we're actually going to be getting into SPL 8 games now. It's great. We're making progress. It's on fast. It's actually my first game of SPL 8 against Dice. But yeah, eventually Spikes died down a little bit, but they're still fantastic. And Drill started off using all sorts of stats, but it eventually standardized itself quite a bit. Back then, it used Balloon a ton. We saw even Steel Gem a bit. We saw Shuka Berry a bit. We saw Leftovers. We saw Choice Scarf. We saw Life Orb. We saw Swords Dance and Choice. And spin and defensive, you name it, Drill used it. So yeah, now we're gonna skip about a year or so on the time. The metagame kind of settled, but there was still a lot of cheese in the metagame. Don't let that dismiss you or anything like that. Ugh, excuse me. I just need to drink more water. This is a long video, so yeah. But we saw all sorts of things happening, and then all of a sudden, with the infestation of things like these cheesy these cheesy kind of Sun teams. Well, I guess praise the Sun, if you will. We decided to ban Doug Trio because of how good it was in these teams, and well, I'd say banning Doug Trio ultimately proved to be one of the best change decisions of all time for an old generation council, but it was ridiculously controversial at the time. So let's get on into this saga. There's a ton here. Basically, Ninetales teams, Sun teams, if you will, tended to use Doug Trio to eliminate things like Tyranitar or even weaken Politoed as it runs Sash Reversal. Also helps get you out of the way. Some things that you saw in these teams like Tentacool on Rain teams or Jirachi on either Sun or Rain teams. In addition to that, Heatran was a huge thing that removed, and Chansey on Stally teams as well as get down Sash and Reversal. Setting that up isn't the hardest thing to do. Yeah, and this goes as recently as 2018. So we're getting a bit more recent, which is kind of unfortunate as we're not even halfway through these. I might skip some replays. I'm gonna go hyper fast on this one. Might just go one or two replays for SPL, but yeah, this game I'm ultimately gonna win. But it was kind of hexy. Um, I get a crit here, yeah, as you see, but that worked out. And he's actually this was like the debut of Spec Salmons, and also this was fighting Gem Landris, which was really cool because I didn't really see a ton of users back then. I think. Um, yeah, this was Solomon versus Jade. I'm gonna skip this one, but it was really cool because Mian Chao was like starting to take off back then. Also, an early Exegol usage. Um, SPL 7, SPL 8 was like Jade's coming out party. Oh, this is like a really offensive game between Megan and Smurf. I'll give you this one now. Yeah, just McMegan's prep for this game was really delightful in my eyes. Anyway, so Doug Trio was like the second target of the old generation council's um, discussion of like how to improve the black and white tier, how to remove like the broken cheese, if you will. Um, and we had a suspect of it. We eventually got banned in the first try, but it was quite the process. And then after that, we also elected to shift it to Arena Trap when people started using Diglett and even Trapinch a little bit on their Sun teams to replace it. So later in 2018, that happened. So it was kind of a saga of 2018 Black White, if you will. Um, and every vote was supported the ban, and the council thoroughly supported it. But the community, there was a huge backlash. CL made these posts opposing the ban, and they got so much likes. And in my opinion, it was just because of his name. No, his posts. I love CL. I value CL as a friend and a player a ton. He's clearly very good at the game and knew what he was doing and knew what he was talking about. But just like it wasn't really fair for him to be putting that sort of Smurf chokes this game away. By the way, that sort of like unprecedented level of stress on unprecedented process. It was all new, old generation tiering. Um, and McMegan messed it. It was funny. This game, this was like the Smog chat was like LOL to like a million at that point, and he lived that, and the life will took him out. But then it came down to he died to he died so he was able to hit, and then it died to Rocky, the rough skin, and that was that. This was okay. So this game I'm not going to bring because it wasn't really a spectacular game. It was a fine game. Like it was a close game, but this game was the first debut of Protect plus Toxic Keldeo. This is when Dice came up with it. So I just want to say that he actually won this game too. And this was another game that just showed the Doug Trio Sun meta game. It was kind of a shit show though, and it drew out of time. So I'm not going to bring this either. I will bring you guys this though. Another Dice game. Wow, Dice is going ham. This was a really cool game for SPL playoffs that year. Anyway, so yeah. Where am I? Okay, so yeah, every vote supported the ban. So the ban happened on Doug Trio, then the ban happened on Arena Trap, and the council was doing its job. But CL was like huge with the backlash, and he got a ton of support. And then other people chimed in the thread as well. But CL had like a post with like 176 likes, if I recall. And my response only like a handful of likes because people are way more verbal if they're being on the side that they believe is oppressed or wrong. Which again, it's fine, but like we answered all their complaints, and ultimately the vote stood. It was great, and in my eyes, this ban has aged so well because if this stuff was still in metagame, there would be so much more to prepare for. It would be so out of hand as well because these things like to go prepare for them, you have to shift your whole entire approach. And it's so restrictive because Doug Trio, it's been banned every generation for a reason, pretty much. Since now Gen 5, 6, 7, now it's going to be banned in 8 in a couple days. I mean, there's no surprise there. You shouldn't be shocked. So yeah, that happened. Community was initially kind of felt like they were being opposed to it. They felt like they were being oppressed by this ban happening, but a small voter pool was kind of it was a couple dozen people that played in tournaments frequently because you can't really do ladder suspects for old generations like that to a certain extent. And that actually this actually predates the Latias DVP vote, which kind of gave the impression that you could. I still am kind of conflicted on that, and if we ever touch Latios, it would probably be through methods like that. But here we are now, so yeah, going to be interesting to see how things shift from there. The Doug Trio eventually just stayed banned. It made Black White a much better metagame. It eliminated the cheese. It was really cool. I was so happy. I remember I was so happy, and I still am so happy this happened. I mean, Doug Trio just had no place, nor did Arena Trap, but it still did leave Gothtel and Shadow Tag. Might be foreshadowing something a bit later in this discussion. We'll have to wait and see. Um, Maybe it's not though, but it's not going to be foreshadowing the next part of our discussion as we get into late 2018. Actually, around when this battle was happening, Extra Drill with Sandrush and Rain on Rain teams was kind of ridiculous. So we voted to ban Sandrush. And that stirred up even more controversy as people felt like we were just going out of our way to like preserve the status quo and cater to the sand balanced teams, and also the initial extra ban by the Mole Man. And I mean, I don't know what to make of it. Um, it's weird. Like extra on rain teams with Sandrush was fundamentally ridiculous against sand teams. But I guess I still ran Skarmory up until a couple years ago, and I ran a lot of Ronin W's. Like it was manageable, but like I totally saw why it was broken. I supported it personally, but this wasn't as overwhelming as my sentiments I've expressed towards other things. If that makes sense. This end game is really cool, by the way. Um, yeah, actually, just enjoy this game. This was like a really good Black White game. This was a really good time for Black White. Um, this is March 18th, 2018. I think this is semifinals of that SBL. He gets to sleep talk right, and that like clinches it. Yeah, just let's call it because they could lock into ice, and then Landorus would need to like get crit a couple times. I don't think he even sleep talks here. Yeah, you would need to get crit repeatedly and like be slower, but didn't happen. Obviously, no dice, if you will. So yeah, this is I think our last SBL game. Yeah, and take that out. Okay. Yeah, and now we're in like the Reuniclus period. No, actually, oh, this is a tiebreak. No, let's ship to the real Reuniclus period. Yep. No, actually, this was Trick Room Reuniclus week one. This is Sun. You know what? On the topic of Sun, this was like a Sun team that was used a ton. Yeah, let's go to this game. It's actually really drawn out. Yeah. Okay. Here we go. But yeah. Ultimately, we decided to ban Sandrush. There was a vote, and it got enough support, so it was great. This is gonna go on hyper fast. This game's over 100 turns, if I recall. So yeah, that ban happened, and extra was still allowed, and it was viable in rain teams, but no longer with Sandrush taking advantage of sand teams. So there was a bit more balance restored, I feel, and I feel like the metagame was really starting to shape up as we saw it now. Um, Again, the ban kind of let shift. Kind of let us align with like we just turned it to Swift Swim instead of a complex ban with Sand Force. We just banned Swift Swim. We banned Sand Rush, not Force. Sorry, and that was that. It was pretty cool. Wow, I no longer want to see this game. Basically, ABR wins with this like unprecedented Doug Triolus Sun team. Um, you can see he just kind of has to dance around the tornadoes. Dice played actually a phenomenal game here, but he was able to not able to break this team ultimately. And ABR played solid too. So yeah, this was like a really cool game though. This had like the whole chat going, "Oh shit." Yeah, here's a game that has a ton of cultural significance as well. It was finals of last SPL, and this team that I built with Dice's extra set just rose to prominence promptly. But anyway, let's get to how we got there. This is all the way in March 2019. So Gliscor kind of was like taking over the metagame. Once Extra went, Gliscor in World Cup of 2019 was superb. No, World Cup 2018 was superb. I used it in the finals against Lax. Other people used it. Solon used it a lot. And then the Smog Tour following that, it was used a ton. The one where Zalmog defeated me in the finals. We saw a ton of Gliscor Sands. It was great. No doubt about that. And from there, that coupled with the fact that Shadow Tag got banned also opened up a ton for like other ground types. Like for example, the Fighting Gem or just the non-choice Landorus T and the Swords Dance or Mixed Garchomp. They were all fantastic at this point in time. Ground types ruled the metagame. Gliscor in particular, I kind of labeled it as a Gliscor takeover because it just reduced the prominence much more than before. But ultimately, all of this, they kind of defaulted back for the psychic types with Magikarp to take over. Because not only did they not mind the spikes, that were getting more and more common through the Ferrothorn, even finding its way into a ton of sand teams at this point, as well as, of course, being basically a perennial staple on rain teams. As you can see here, there's a Pharaoh War, Latios, both teams, no shock there. Um, but Hidden Power Ice plus Thunder on Rio Nicholas, a McMegan set. We Three Kings himself used a ton of that SPL. I should have included a replay of it. Fuck. I don't know why I didn't. But yeah, and then that just caught on and it just ran away with the whole metagame, which was great. Um, Excuse me. Sorry. But yeah, that was great. And then all of a sudden, that with like also Alexander within part is sort of surging again. We saw like a little mini resurgence of the psychic types. Um, it basically and so those ground types that were still good the whole time, but they were kept in check a little bit, and you really had to cover Ryu Nicholas at the time. So Champoltar saw even more use for it. Jirachi kind of saw more use again, a lot, never really fully surfaced. And yeah, it made a ton of sense, especially with the Gothitelle ban, because Gothitelle was the Shadow type ban rather, because Shadow tag Pokemon were able to like trick Ryu Nicholas and dispose of its ability to kind of sweep, which is really cool. So yeah, Gliscor stand grew really good. Tauntaun in particular took off during World Cup 18 and never looked back from there for the next couple of months. It was really good during the Smog Tour and Classic that year as well. But then Shadow Tag was also broken for pretty much obvious reasons, gaining traction because fuck Gothitelle. And it was a kind of overdue in my eyes. So finally, that got banned last year, 2019. So we're in mid 2019. And then finally, the Renicholas breakthrough occurred. The Ice Renicholas with Thunder. Usually, I actually used Ice plus Focus Blast in this most recent SPL, but that's beside his point. Was there to kind of respond to Gliscor and the surge of offensive line versus T and whatnot. So it was great. And then in response to that, we're getting to a more recent point. This team kind of combines two eras of Black White, if that makes sense. I'm gonna move this too fast because it had the aforementioned kind of infamous set on the Renicholas, but on top of that, it also had this Excadrill set with Earthquake, Ironhead, Rapid Spin, Protect, and it had this like longevity as a spinner, which was really great. Um, to the point where if you're able to like knock or trick or burn Ferrothorn, and you're able to keep off versus it all game with extra, even if you take a knock yourself, and that was a really great anti-spikes measure. And as you see, it's doing 40 to drill, what, -1? It's like, it's great. It really is great. Um, so that was like, it's just this ruler team that I built for Finals SPL that Dice helped me with the drill set that he came up with. He came up with the drill set, and McMegan came up with the Renicholas set, and we three came to self popularize. I'm not taking credit for any of the individual sets or Pokemon, rather the team I did make, which was really cool. We all kind of worked together, and just seeing the collaboration amongst the Black White community really put me in a good mood at the time. But yeah, it was just seeing all these like different metagame elements just come together was fascinating in my eyes. Did you finally go for the Earthquake here? Yeah, well, if you did, it was on the Switch. Oh, we want Renicholas. Okay, really conservative as Ruler. I like this. Yeah, Ruler ultimately wins this game with the Renicholas. Can't mind. Ice takes it out. Ice takes it out. Needs to put it to the Switch. I didn't even bother. Okay. So yeah, this is we're getting into this SPL now. One, two, three. Oh, I guess we have three of my games. All right, we're just gonna speed through these to finish it out. So yeah, extra resurgence. So the Dice Protect set. On that Reuni team that I lead, it kind of led to like that classic and Smogtor following that. Was a ton of that usage of that drill, and that led to the psychic setting. And you notice it's kind of recurrence of what we saw with the psychic metagame previously, the Magic Guard metagame previously. Once drill kind of gained more traction, it died out, and drill finally found itself in a more standardized position. So that was really cool. Finally, we're getting to a bit more recent of a time. Drill kept going strong, going strong, going strong, but then we saw a ton of Breloom with Poison Heal. Um, that took off, and that was kind of surprising no one. It did so well against those teams, and with Nicholas dying down, there's even more reason, especially seeing as it did well with Pursuit, so that helped against Latios, which honestly was at an all-time high. Um, so yeah, and eventually Dice started this wave where we were like, okay, maybe banning sleep moves is to play. So it was discussed in my council, and admittedly a bit last minute, but we're having another vote once SPL ends. Black and White Sleep got banned for this SPL, and in my opinion, it was such an improvement for the metagame. We avoided Sleep Talk Roulette, which we actually saw in that BKC Dice game a little bit back, but also just in general, Sleep Talk being so important in Black White, and now it's not anymore, which was great. Um, yeah, and that was that. So we banned Sleep, and then this metagame that we saw this SPL, which I really liked. Um, Shifted into place. I mean, you could argue that Latios not having to run Sleep Talk anymore, being able to run Trick on every team makes it even more ridiculous, which is fair. But Latios has been ridiculous for a while now, so there's that as well. Um, just check my notes again. So yeah, with the Sleep Band, actually unironically made the Breloom better, and for the reason of this set in particular. And again, I didn't time this; it's just working out nicely. The Sub Punch set was just superb. Yeah, I got a crit there, which sucked for ZF, but in general, that set was great. Subtech with Focus Punch. You're actually going to see it again in my game against Rise, which probably the last game you'll see in this long video. But yeah, to make matters worse, of course, the Protect plus Swords Dance Facade set. I actually came up with Facade initially between the last SPL and this SPL. I used it at first in a game against Pasho for the finals of Black White Global Championship to clinch that. But also, I used it in between then in tournaments like Classic and S Tour. Facade Breloom just kind of finally became solid and did a ton of damage to things like Amoonguss, which is really good and still is good, but also bulk upsets. Again, a lot of this I discussed in my History of Bloom video, so check that out. It's got a lot of views. I guess that means I'm doing something right. But yeah, it's pretty cool, all things considered. Um, and yeah, um, just again, Bloom just shot up in usage despite Spore being banned because it's using these Poison Heal sets with Protect, which is fun. Yeah, I was going to move choice here. Now we get two last my games. This game is actually a team with triple psychic. Just showing that, like, yeah, the metagame's still evolving. Psychic types with Magic Guard are still really great. Alakazam actually finally started seeing more users again in this SPL, which I thought to be cool. I used it twice myself. This is one of them on this triple psychic team, which actually used the same six John W's against me, but in my opinion, with a bit more consistency found due to the set choices. So yeah. Um, that said, of course, so what am I thinking here? That said, of course, oh yeah, Breloom's still great. This is just like Renicholas kind of a countermeasure to Breloom. So you know why I see it is Renicholas is only going to get better. Alakazam's only going to get better for the next couple months. Then eventually people will start spamming like Excadrill, Choppletar, Scarftar, maybe even Jirachi will see more usage. We've already seen Scizor usage. So yeah, I feel like Black White's kind of in this cyclical state right now, where we're seeing one trend and then a counter trend and then a counter trend. Then it's just going back to like the state of the trend, and a lot of that revolves around Magic Guard slash Spikes slash Excadrill and countermeasures to Magic Guard, countermeasures to Excadrill, etc. And I just find that really cool how Black White kind of continues to pile off itself. And yeah, this is the final game that I played in SPL 10, and it was probably one of the games I played the best, despite the result not being ideal. As I was moving around a lot, I got a little unfortunate, but it was a great game. It's already on my channel, but now we're pretty much at the present day. So congratulations if you sat through this whole thing. We've gotten through 10 years of Black White history, and I'm sure I unfortunately skimped out on some details or compromised the mentions of some parts of the metagame, but it's been a wild ride playing for a vast majority of this metagame and following it to the extent I have, and I'm just really proud that I'm still here and I'm probably one of the like household Black White names, and that toxicness I'm gonna have nightmares about forever. But moving on, um, it's just been a really exciting metagame to play, and I couldn't be more appreciative of the player base, the people that have made all the tournaments in it possible, and all the opportunities that I've had over the years. And I can't wait to continue playing it in Classic, in so many side tours, be it RO, APL, or random like Discord Premier Leagues and whatnot, Smogon, like lower tier Premier Leagues and lower tiers of Black White, or in tournaments like SPL. It'll no longer be in Black, it'll no longer be in World Cup, unfortunately, but that is fine. If you guys have any questions about Black White or you want me to expand on anything, I will do so to the best of my ability. Please don't hesitate to ask. I'm always willing to inform people and engage about Black White or help team building. Feel free to contact me in Smogon or on Showdown if I'm on, or of course on Discord where you're most likely to find me. And I'll be able to discuss Black White teams anytime. If you're not someone I'm playing against or you're someone playing against my friend, then yeah, it's chill. But yeah, with Black White Cup coming, I figured now would be a good time to get through the history, especially since people have been liking my little contents in Black White history that SPL's over with. And stay tuned because there's going to be a really big Black and White post by me outlining all my SPL teams in prep in the near future. I've been kind of postponing it, and I'm actually probably going to start playing in-game tonight because I like really want to play in-game for nostalgia purposes since I'm quarantined. And I'm looking, what better time for nostalgia before I start my full-on adult life once I graduate and shit happens. Um, but yeah, we are here now, and I'm really happy with where we are in Black and White. And I'm thinking that Sleep is probably going to remain banned. We're going to have another vote in it soon, and then after that we're gonna maybe discuss Latios. Who knows? That would open a whole huge can of worms. I don't know how I feel about it, but I am excited to see what others think of it, if that makes sense. We'll wait and see. That's for sure. But yeah, this is the end of my SPL 10 run. And I hope you guys enjoyed this video. I hope you guys enjoyed the history of Black White. And whoever watched up to this point, put something in the comments. I'll shoot you a like. Hit me up if you have any questions, please. I really do appreciate the viewers' support. Gives me something to do when I'm freaking in quarantine. And yeah, it's Finch. I really hope you guys enjoyed. Peace out. I'm just gonna wait till the end of this replay. And yeah, this is the history of Black and White overused from Black and White 1 all the way through Black and White 2 and the expansion of the metagame as years went on. And my ex finally died, ending our discussion now. Alright, peace.